Hey YouTube, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making a little soft glass tree pendant working off Mandrel. So if you're looking to expand your skills beyond the Mandrel and want to try something else, this might be a good exercise for you. So my name's Heather Barrett and I've been working with glass since 2008 and teaching since 2016. So on my channel there should be some other tutorials for you and just little process videos. So if you have any ideas on stuff you're on the lookout for, please let me know, comment below, and as always, like, subscribe, comment, it really helps the channel out. All right, let's get to the studio. All right, here's our bench setup. We have some tweezers, a marver, some tools to push glass like a brass stump shaper, some parallel mashers, a tungsten pick, and here's the glass we're using today. We have white, teal, medium blue, and cobalt. And I forgot we're using some intense black in this one. That's going to be for our stringers. So I am starting by pulling two sizes of stringer, one a little thicker and one just a little bit thinner. Use whatever thickness you're comfortable with. You just want one that's a little thicker than the other one. So to pull this stringer, I'm just getting a small gather of glass molten at the end of this intense black, grabbing just a little bit with my tweezers and slowly pulling upward until it gets stiffer and stiffer, and then I break it off with my cold tweezers. And then I just melt in that extra little bit of black just to get it ready for the next time. To start off with this pendant, we're going to start by making a gather of white glass, probably about the size of a grape. I'm using two white rods stuck together. I just find it easier when making a gather because I have two handles just in case it droops off of it, in case I get it too hot. As we all know, white is very, very, very soft and it's easy to lose it, so having that extra handle on it just makes it a little bit easier for me. So I'm just continuing to rotate while trying to focus my flame on the handle so I can heat up additional glass to add to this gather. Once I have it at a size that I'm happy with, I'm going to take it out of the flame and continue to rotate just to let that white solidify and cool off a little bit, especially because that white is so incredibly soft. And I'm going to start rolling it on the marver to get more of a cylindrical shape. I really like my Blast Shield torch mounted marver for this, but you can use any marver you like, but I do love mine and I highly recommend it. Once I have that shape, I'm going to go ahead and remove one of the handles and melt in that excess little bit of glass. I try to make it a habit to clean up the ends of the glass rods as I'm using them so I don't end up with a mess to clean up when I'm done. And now we're going to start encasing this with a transparent color. But I didn't cut any of the time out because I really want to emphasize how long you have to wait before adding an additional layer of glass on, because that white is so soft. It would be the same with any pastel color. So I'm probably waiting about 30 seconds or so outside of the flame, and then at that point I start heating up the rod of transparent glass, and at probably about the 40-second mark is probably when I'm actually touching that transparent glass on top of that white. Waiting that long will really help you to avoid any distortion from touching the transparent glass to the white glass. So I'm just going around this white cylinder base and just encasing it with stripes of this medium blue transparent glass, just trying to get it buttered up right against each other. I'm not encasing the entire piece. I'm leaving a little bit of room for my transition color, and I'm leaving some room on the bottom. So just the middle, just the flat portion of this, as opposed to the rounded part. Now that the entire 360 degrees is encased, we're going to start melting that in. We do want to be careful to not overheat the white glass since underneath we're trying to focus more of the heat on the transparent. So I switched to a smaller flame just to get a better target on this. I'm making sure to only focus on the center of this because I want to be able to push out any air bubbles that I might have trapped between those layers of transparent glass. And I'm even using my brass stump shaper to help this along a little bit. Yes, you can use just heat for this, but because you're trying to be careful of not overheating the white, I like to use tools to kind of help assist a little bit so I don't have to use as much heat. So keep things relatively cool. Try to get the heat only on the transparent and minimize how much is going into that white glass, and use your tools to help you keep it cool. Once we have our first transparent color added and melted in, now we're going to start adding the second color. Now, like before, I tried to keep that white glass outside of the flame for a little bit before I actually touch that transparent color to it. I'm adding 4 swipes of this aqua glass, starting from the tip and overlapping a little bit with that original blue that I had added earlier. I'm leaving just a little bit of a gap where you can still see the white glass, just for any air bubbles to be able to escape when I melt this in. And now I'm just adding little dots of the aqua over the medium blue. When I mix this together, this will make a nice little transition of color. So I'm going to start melting in that aqua glass, and just like before, I'm trying to put most of the heat on the transparent as opposed to the white. Starting at the tip, melting it out, and this is where those little gaps of white come in. I like to use a little clay tool just to push that transparent glass to cover the white. This is how I'm able to get a good overlay of transparent colors without trapping too many bubbles. So take your time doing this. Do this in as many small steps you need instead of one gigantic step. That will help you to not overheat this too much and cause the white to kind of mix in with the transparent color. This is why I like to use tools to help move the transparent glass a little bit, so I don't need to use quite as much heat and I don't have to worry as much about overheating that white glass. So just do it in small steps. Take it out of the flame as needed if you need to let it cool off a little bit. So now we're going to go ahead and fuse a handle to it. I'm just using the aqua glass, heating up both the pendant itself and the tip of the glass, and joining them together in the fire. We'll let this solidify a little bit, and then we're going to start heating up the pendant. This way we can start turning it a little bit and twisting and making a nicer transition between that medium blue and the aqua glass. And remember that the bottom half of this pendant has not been encased yet. We're not trying to play with that side yet, just the top half. Once we're happy with the way that looks and we've smoothed it out a little bit, gonna let that solidify before we start removing that white glass handle. So as you can see, I'm just heating up where the white connects with the pendant and very slowly pulling it apart, trying not to add too much extra material. I had a little bit of excess material, so you can see I'm just pulling it off with the white glass and then melting it in a little bit. So I have a nice smooth surface. And same as before, I didn't cut out any of the video because I wanted you to see how long I'm waiting before adding that transparent color over the white. I'm making sure it is as cool as I can get it without the glass cracking to avoid distorting the white. Again, it's probably 30-40 seconds or so before that transparent glass even touches the white. This time I'm adding the encasement layer a little bit differently because I don't want there to be a transition between the darker and lighter color. I'm just applying it as a wrap around it. I'm trying to get that wrap a little bit on the thicker side because I am going to use my brass shaper to push all that transparent glass over that white. And again, it's something you're going to take your time doing because you don't want to accidentally heat the white core too much. So just little by little, many small steps to get where you're going. And you'll see that I'm doing kind of a rolling motion. So I heat up the glass and I roll that brass marver over it in the direction that I'm trying to get the glass to go. And when there's just a tiny bit of white glass left uncovered, you can just use the corner of the brass marver to just nudge it to the center. And I like to go back and just look for any spots where I can see a little bit of that white glass poking through. And I just use, this is just a little stainless steel clay tool that I've gotten. Just something to push the glass in the direction I want it to go. You could do the same thing with the brass marver. Or you could use a tungsten poker if you wanted to. And while the video is showing a tedious, repetitive process, I just want to remind you guys that if you like what I'm doing here, the best things you guys can do for me to help out the channel is just to like, subscribe, comment. If you guys have ideas for future things, please let me know. I'm trying to build a little library here of tutorials for people. And you are also more than welcome to check out my website. There should be a link down below. I do have lots of glass goodies, postcards, stickers, things like that. So a little something for everybody. So back on track with the tutorial. I'm just getting the surface nice and smooth here. And in my next step, I'm actually going to make a little mistake. I wanted to leave that up just so you can see how to recover from it, because mistakes are just going to happen. You just got to know how to recover from them. So I'm scooping up some Raku Frit, and you can see that the pendant just came right off of that glass rod. So I'm just heating up my hemostats before I grab it. And I'm just heating up the end of that glass rod along with the tip of the pendant. And I'm just going to fuse them together. And recovery is not always going to go this smoothly. Just prioritize getting the piece and warming it up if you need to, and then you can connect it to something. But I was pretty confident in my ability to fuse them, so I just went with it. You saw I was just giving the piece a little bit of warmth just to make sure it didn't get too cold while it was sitting on the bench. Alright, so back to adding the Raku Frit. I'm going to heat up where the cobalt and blue meet up and roll it in some frit. And it'll take me a couple tries to get the amount of coverage that I want. So I'm just going to continue to heat up the pendant and then roll it through the Raku Frit. I took a little longer with this step because I'm almost out of Raku Frit, so I'm trying not to spill any. So once you have all that melted in, we're going to give this pendant a little bit of heat and use our mashers to make a slightly flatter canvas to draw our trees on. Not making this totally flat, this is still a somewhat thick pendant. It just gives us a little more surface area to draw on. And I'm melting out the chill marks, but also I want it to be a slightly more rounded shape, so that's why I'm being pretty generous with the heat here. I don't want the edges to look too squared off. I'm actually going to try and have one side fairly rounded while the other side is going to be flat, so I'm going to use a marver for that. So I'm adding more heat into that rounded front side of this pendant, and then I'm just going to let it rest on a marver to kind of let gravity help create this shape. But this is all personal preference. If you prefer a more squared off shape, that's totally fine. If you even don't want it flat and you want it to be more of a true teardrop shape, that's totally fine too. I just like having a flat surface to draw on. I find it's easier and I think it's just looks nicer for the design. So now it's time to attach our punty. So you can see it, this cobalt blue has a little bit of extra glass on the end here. So I am going to heat it up and just kind of use my graphite marver as a pencil sharpener to get a nice pointy edge there. I'm still keeping the pendant warm, just flashing it in and out of the flame once in a while, but I'm not getting it to a glowing heat. If I do that, they'll fuse together. So I heated up the tip of the cobalt, pressed it into the bottom of the pendant, and now I'm going to flame cut that aqua off. And as you can see, there was a bit of thermal shock, so I didn't even need to flame cut it. So let's heat that up and remove some of that extra glass that broke off there using the tweezers. And don't forget to flash the rest of the pendant inside of the flame once in a while. We don't want it to get too cool and crack. So let's start by drawing the tree trunk with our thicker stringer here. I'm going to draw 3 lines for the trunk and main branches of this tree. And remember, we're staying outside of the flame, just to the right of it. And watch how the black stringer lights up into orange. You can kind of see where I am in the flame, or just outside of the flame. And I like to use this little clay tool to just kind of pat down that black stringer, just to make sure if there's any spot that wasn't completely stuck to the surface, it's not going to ball up on me. So now we're making some extra branches here. This is my slightly thinner stringer, and this is something I would recommend just practicing on paper first to kind of get an idea of how you want your tree to look and how it's going to look like before you actually do it in the fire. And you'll see each time I place a stringer branch, I tend to go over it with that clay tool, just to make sure it is firmly stuck to the surface and the pointed tips are not going to ball up on me. I'm trying to keep the tips of these branches nice and pointy. You can see that when I get to the end of a stringer, I try to pull it away to try and get a thinner end of the stringer. And again, I'm just tapping it down just to avoid any potential balling up that black glass might do. You can make your tree however you want. Remember that no 2 trees are alike, they're not symmetrical, so don't stress too much about the design. And again, this is something I like to try on pencil and paper first, just to see what it looks like before committing to doing it in glass. So now we're going to melt in that black stringer for the tree. Try to be careful of the punty. You don't want to overheat it too much and have it fuse together. So just do it in small steps to avoid overheating. And next we're going to make the loop. There are many different ways that you can make a loop, so do whichever one's comfortable for you. But in my case, we're going to go ahead and reattach that Aqua rod of glass. And then we're going to stretch it out. So fuse these together first. We're going to get all the material that you want to use for your loop evenly heated. Wait, and then as it starts cooling off, then we're going to start slowly pulling it apart. This way we get a nice long piece of glass that's nice and even, not too thin. Don't pull too hard because we don't want to disturb the punty on the other side. Then we're going to go ahead and flame cut that aqua off. Don't forget to warm up your piece a little. And now we're going to slowly go back and forth as if we're playing the violin, just heating up one side of that loop material, and just let it slowly start to droop down. And we can assist it with tweezers here. When you're heating it up, you're not looking for a super bright orange glow, just that kind of dark cherry color, so you can move the glass, but it's not balling up on you. And we're just going to attach it to the back side of this pendant and just tap it down a little bit with the tweezers. If the bail has started to close a little bit, you can get in there with one side of your tweezers, or you can use your tungsten like I'm doing here, just to widen that opening a little bit. And put a little extra heat into that connection of the bail into the back of the pendant just to make sure it's secure. And now we're going to go ahead and take it off the punty. So flash the tweezers in the flame, make sure you have a good grip on your pendant, and then tap it against the torch head. Last step is just heating up that little punty mark just to make sure it's nice and smooth. And then into the kiln it goes. Here's what they end up looking like. Thanks for watching. Bye.